Good evening, and thank you for joining me, Stephanie Roberts, and Sarah Woodwick as we present our Saebo presentation. We're going to give you a little bit of information about Saebo, how it's been used in the past, how it can be used in the future, and really what you as an OT can gain from it, but more importantly, what your clients can gain after following a stroke and how this product can be used to regain hand function. Saebo Inc. is a global provider of innovative rehabilitation products. The name for Saebo was based on an acronym that was chosen based on the founder's grandmother's name, Sarah Elaine Booth, who passed away in the late 1980s. So who can benefit from Saebo? Well, our applicable population that we're going to be focusing on today are stroke survivors and neurologically impaired individuals. And the treatment protocols are based on brain plasticity, or how much the brain can regain function after an injury. Stroke is the leading cause of long-term disability in the United States, affecting over 700,000 Americans each year. One major side effect that affects occupation is the loss of hand function. Developed in 2001 by two OTs who were actually also brothers, the Saebo began. Affordable Treatment Equipment Inc. was their first venture, and this was in two separate locations in North Carolina and South Carolina. Client training sessions were 6 times per year, but there were some limitations. Stroke survivors could not travel to the training locations, and therapists wanted to become more trained to offer therapy both nationally and internationally. And there was a major need for expansion. Partnered with 3 continuing education companies. There was Motivations Inc., National Rehabilitation Services Inc., and Education Resources Inc. They were able to offer and teach 40 classes a year for therapists, but there was a need for capital expansion. CHMG was chosen as an investor based on background in healthcare, and this investor allowed them to stay in control of their company. They relocated to the facility in Charlotte, North Carolina in August 2004, and in 2004 the name changed to Saebo. Saebo's treatment principles are based on current neurorehabilitation research of the brain's ability to reprogram itself. And reprogramming occurs when there is mass practice and task-oriented activities through arm training. Motor training requires repetitive practice of motor movements to reprogram the hand and arm after a stroke.
Okay, so Stephanie and I had a chance to actually speak to Kathy, who is a regional account manager for Saebo, and she was able to show us some of the products, how they're used, and how OTs can use them in treatment. The Saebo Flex was introduced in 2002. This is a custom-made fabricated orthosis that helps clients in the releasing act of a grasp and release activity. So the client will voluntarily flex their digits around an object, and the spring-loaded system will help the client to release the object. So this is very functional in that you need to do that activity for basically all ADLs, for grooming, cooking, cleaning, taking care of children. So this one will be highly used for occupational therapists to get that basic function of grasp and release. The Saebo Reach was introduced in 2007. This is a device that also includes the elbow, because we all know that function doesn't just stop at the hand and wrist, but we need full function of the upper extremity to complete many activities. So this device includes the Saebo Flex, but has an added on above elbow component. This is ideal for individuals who have injuries in both the hand and the elbow. So this allows the patient to incorporate more of their upper extremity, but still incorporates that grasp and release activity for therapy. The Saebo stretch was introduced in 2006. This is an alternative to traditional splints. This helps the client in a flexing movement, so it's not a standard immobilization splint, but it is much more functional. It includes a revolutionary stretch technology that allows the fingers and the hand to move instead of just immobilize. So on the next slide, we'll be showing you kind of a comparison there, but this is more of a long duration type of splint to return the fingers to the desired position. So as I said before, this is a slide showing you a comparison of a traditional flex splint to the Saebo stretch. As you can see, the traditional method of splinting is very bulky and rigid, doesn't allow for a lot of functional movement, whereas the Saebo stretch will allow the person to move with it on, and it's also light and durable and can be worn for long periods of time and can actually be comfortable rather than uncomfortable and rigid. The Saebo Mas is more of a dynamic mobile device, which includes the entire upper extremity for more gross motor movements, whereas the other products we've talked about so far are for more fine motor movements and grasp and release. So this involves the entire upper extremity from the shoulder to the elbow and helps the hand in functional tasks. So as you can see in the photo on the slide, the client grasps the ball, and then the device helps her upper extremity feel virtually weightless. So an OT would use this device to introduce repetition for certain activities to the client. Repetition helps rebuild those connections in the brain and also helps to rebuild the muscle memory. So the client is essentially relearning how to do these activities by doing repetitive movements over and over again. The Saebo MyoTrack Infinity is a device that can be connected to various Saebo products. What it does is it triggers a biofeedback stimulation. So the client will initiate the movement such as flexing or releasing, and this device will send a stimulation to the muscle, helping them to complete that movement. This is an all-in-one clinical device that provides a total body solution, and this is a very revolutionary product that we weren't able to find information that any other companies had it. So it's really cool to see how it can be used, and you can refer to the Saebo website for a few video demonstrations of this device. The Saebo Rejoice is another device that triggers the whole upper extremity rehabilitation process. So a lot of us have talked about using Wii or other gaming devices as rehab for clients with deficits in the upper extremities. So that's exactly what this is. There's a computer screen with either a racing game or other types of games that they have, and the client will grab onto the device and use their upper extremities to move it right, move it left, move it up, move it down, whatever the game requires. So this is more of a fun task, but it is also very functional because you get a lot of upper extremity movement, a lot of range of motion. For neurological injuries, this is great for rebuilding cognitive tasks, as well as a lot of visual tasks such as visual scanning, visual attention, visual acuity. So as an occupational therapist, you want to make sure that your client doesn't have extreme deficits in the visual arena in order to use this device, because then it could be a little more frustrating than helpful. But Stephanie and I were able to try this device, and it is actually very fun, but difficult and challenging at the same time.
EMG triggered stimulation is the combination of both biofeedback and stimulation. It's based on the client's own voluntary muscle movements So if the client actively contracts a muscle, they will receive a stimulation. The OT can set the threshold for the client depending on where they are in their rehabilitation. And when the OT sets this, they want to make it the just right challenge so they can monitor it and make it either more or less difficult depending where the client is at that time. And when the client reaches the threshold, he or she is rewarded with the stimulation to those muscles. So in this, the client is doing the work to actually contract the muscle and then receiving stimulation. And when you combine this with the visual and auditory feedback, it allows the client to monitor progress. And through this cognitive relearning process, cortical plasticity can be achieved. The reciprocal EMG triggered stimulation, also known as the RUTS program, is used in clients who have increased tone and a difficult time relaxing their spastic muscles. And the biofeedback stimulation program involves both the agonist and antagonist muscles, and it's triggered upon the relaxation of a muscle instead of the activation. So this would be used in clients who are hypertonic versus hypotonic. In this program, there's an emphasis placed on relaxing the hypertonic muscles in order for the stimulation to be triggered to the opposing weakened muscle groups. Now I'm going to talk about a little bit of the rationale for the use of Saebo in eval and treatment. OTs can evaluate clients' abilities and limitations by using the Saebo products in an eval by giving the client the Saebo product and also how to use that during an occupation-based activity. This would allow the OT to see the client's ability and limitations based on how much or how little they could do using the Saebo product. And the Saebo products allow clients to use his or her affected hand in therapy and at home. So this is something that's portable that can be used both in the clinic and taken home with them as well. And therapy allows the client to immediately begin the use of hand for functional tasks. This can be used right after in a subacute patient setting where some of the basic principles and techniques are the product's position of the arm, hand, wrist, and fingers is in the appropriate position for functional activities. And repetitive motor movements can lead to muscle memory. Based on the brain's plasticity, repeatedly using the hand to use it in functional activities can really rebuild the brain's ability to use the hand independently. And the EMG triggered stimulation trains the client on how to contract the muscles of the affected hand, whereas the RUTS program trains the client on how to relax the muscles of the affected hand. Saebo products really do fit into every area of the OT scope of practice. OTs can increase functional hand use for ADLs such as self-care and feeding, IADL such as grasp and release during meal preparation, home maintenance, any sort of thing that you would do at home where you would need your hand. Also in play and leisure, a lot of the Saebo interventions are based on grasp and release of a ball to promote hand use. But this can be used for balls, puzzle pieces, even books. In work and education, functional use of the hand to pick up a piece of paper, a pencil, anything that is on the desk that would be needed for education or work. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the relation to the OTPF and the OT process. Now we're going to talk about the relation to the OTPF, basically how the Saebo can be used in evaluation, intervention, and outcomes. During evaluation, an occupational profile is created, and this gives the OT an idea of what occupations are important to the client and what the OT should focus on in treatment. During an analysis of occupational performance, OTs use skilled observation during a therapeutic activity session to identify the abilities and limitations in the affected hand while using the Saebo. And OTs can use the information that they've gathered. Now that we know a little bit more about the Saebo products, let's talk about evidence-based practice and research. Zong and Stone in 2013 did a study of how useful and effective the providing movement guidance and hepatic feedback was to enhancing muscle memory development. And the participants were split up into two groups: the traditional group, which was given a welding task to do freehand, and a mechanical group, which was given the same task to do with robotic assistance. And the results of the study showed that the traditional group didn't do as well as the group that was getting the physical guidance and feedback from the robotic hand. And this is also helping their performance. It gives them better control and moving speed when compared to the traditional group. And here's one quote that I really liked. It says, "Through the use of sensory motor learning and the development of kinesthetic memory, a person can accomplish specific physical movements without thinking about his or her body parts should move." So in conclusion, we talked about how the stroke is the leading cause of long-term disability in the U.S. and it affects more than 700,000 Americans each and every year, and that stroke survivors are perfect candidates for treatment using Saebo products to regain hand function in the affected arm. And Saebo Inc. is a global provider of innovative rehabilitation products that use muscle memory and brain plasticity as the foundation to regain lost hand function to promote independence in functional tasks. And Saebo's treatment principles are based on the current neurorehabilitation research of the brain's ability to reprogram itself. The EMG triggered stimulation is a combination of biofeedback and stimulation, and it's based on the client's own voluntary muscle movement. And the client is required to actively contract the muscle in order to receive stimulation. Visual and auditory feedback are helpful to the client because it allows the client to monitor their own progress. And through this cognitive relearning process, cortical plasticity can be achieved. And also, it gives OTs a good option because they can set a threshold for the client to reach, and thereby using the Just Right Challenge to give them a task that is difficult but not impossible. When the client reaches that threshold, he or she is rewarded with the stimulation to those muscles. The RETS program is a little bit different than the EMG triggered stimulation, and it's used in clients with increased tone versus decreased tone. And these clients have difficulty relaxing spastic muscles, impairing function. And the biofeedback stimulation program involves both the agonist and antagonist muscle groups, and it's triggered upon relaxing of the muscle instead of the activation. And in this program, there's an emphasis of relaxing one muscle group so that the other has the ability to contract, which is the weakened muscle group. And OTs can evaluate clients' abilities and limitations by using this product during any kind of occupation-based activity. And these products really encourage the contraction or relaxation to promote functional use of the hand after injury. And finally, we just wanted to remind you about the idea behind Saebo. These products that were presented provide rehabilitation to functional hand loss by using repetitive movements in combination with stimulation. And this reprograms the brain, or takes advantage of that plasticity that the brain has. And this is to promote increased functional use of the hand after a stroke.